Out is a half-hour multi-part series focusing on the LGBTQ community in Brandon, Manitoba, funded by the Community Radio Fund of Canada. This series will share the difficulties LGBTQ members have faced, the achievements and strides they have made, as well as the support received from the community. We hope the story shared will help those uncomfortable with any LGBTQ lives understand the opposite point of view and become more sensitive to the struggles they face, as well as provide support and information for any LGBTQ members in the area.
Hi, my name is Dakota Bicklemeyer, and I'm proud to bring to you Out, a new series dedicated to the lives of Brandon's LGBTTQ community. While much of the series will be covering the organizers and coordinators who hold the events, put on shows, volunteers, and professionals alike, they really are expected to give their voices in order to publicly represent their groups, usually have much experience to do so, and are go-to people that the media will usually seek when needing to cover stories. But in order to give a more personal look into the lives of Westman's queer community, it was intended to gather interviews with more regular or non-organizing people. That was the intention. The reality is much more difficult as, regardless of how one asked, the local LGBT community seemed a little too shy to be sharing their lives. In the interviews we did gather, perhaps it's telling that none of them are from Westman. In this second episode of what we call Queer Lives, a special side of this series, we will be joined by Out co-producer Jan Eck, who was very willing to share his story for this series, knowing that it was in much need of subjects. As a longtime producer of documentary radio for CJ 106, he has interviewed dozens of local people and had always hoped that he could one day share his story, which is pretty wild and unique. Jan is also well known as a musician with some big-time credits in his career, but his path into the big league music industry coincided with his story of coming out and embracing the many gay communities he has lived in, a story that says not only affected his relationship with the music industry, but with music itself.
Can you tell us about yourself and what you do for a living, and who are you?
Who am I? Well, my name is Jan Eck, and I'm a gay male, and I have done various things throughout my life, but I consider myself to be an artist first and foremost. I'm a lover of nature and animals, and I'm currently the partner of another man, and we've been together 10 years in a loving relationship, and I'm enjoying that part of my life extremely well. But I've also worked in other capacities as in retail, for example. We'll talk about a little bit later about my time as in leather retail in Montreal and Toronto. But I've also been a cook as well for various places, and notably in town at Wildflower Cafe and Lady of the Lake. Some of you might recognize my voice because I've done so much work here at CJ 106 as a producer and a co-producer of documentary series, including broadcasts from Under the Big Sky, Reduce the Stigma, Puffed Wheat City, and Westman Immigrant Experience. So I've had a great time learning the trade and providing stories for Brandon listeners with CJ 106.
When did you know that you were gay? At the time, how did you feel about that compared to even now?
Okay, so those feelings of being gay came very slowly. I mean, you're a kid, you're not thinking about sex. And I was a kid when I started to realize this, but you don't naturally think about sex as a kid too much, I don't think. You might have some weird experiences, but that wasn't the case for me. I just started to realize that I was attracted to my friends, to some male images, and this was at a fairly young age. But like I said, it came very slowly. I mean, maybe an odd feeling that much younger, like at 7, and by 10, it was starting to dawn on me that yes, I think that I'm a little different than everybody else. Also, going to school as early as 5 years old, I had a neighborhood friend who was very effeminate. And it kind of became quickly known around all the little kids that he was gay, or other slurs that may have been more in use at that time. And so this kid's greatly influenced my perception because I saw so much negativity directed towards him, and he was just young and innocent, being himself. And I kind of knew that wasn't me, but I kind of knew part of it was. Like, maybe not the feminine side, but I had a feeling like I was just like him. And so I sort of watched my behavior from then on in. I was like much more guarded about any sort of feminine expression I may have. Now I'm a dichotomy. I break that rule myself because I remember, and you can't help yourself, it's Christmas time, and you're wondering what you want for Christmas, and I think kids just blurt out what their feelings are. I wanted a Ken doll. I wanted a male doll that I could play with, and that's an example of some of the femininity that I might have had as a kid. I also liked poetry. I liked my quiet times. Wasn't too much like the other rambunctious boys. So these are some of the things that I had that sort of made me feel like I was different. And I didn't really have a word for it until kind of years later. I had a girlfriend when I was a little older, say in my teen years. We broke up. I was attracted to guys during that, but it was kind of very confusing to me. I also liked her a lot. But after we broke up, I kind of was like full-time gay. I said to myself, I was in a small town, Portage-la-Prairie, that yeah, I don't think I could have another girlfriend again in my own mind, and then it was kind of constant angst from then on in.
Music has been a big part of your life, while growing up, is that how you ended up expressing yourself and becoming more
Exactly.
open to your identity?
Well, this was late 70s, early 80s, which was a really exciting time in music, because the very overproduced classic rock era was just about to get a big slap in the face by a whole bunch of young punks who said, I don't care how I play, I just want to express myself. And there was all sorts of expression coming out. So classic rock was dominated by white men, basically a few white women thrown in there and a few black artists like Jimi Hendrix. But punk rock came and the new wave exploded, and a whole bunch of doors were open for people of color, for gay people, and there was a whole bunch of new music being made. For me, myself, in the closet at that time, 15 and in high school, 70s Manitoba, I found punk rock. And punk rock had a lot of gay elements to it. They also had some anti-gay elements to it. I sort of rode those out. I saw those anti-gay elements everywhere. But at that time, I was learning how to sing along to classic rock records. I mean, that was my earlier days. And then punk rock, I was ready. I was ready to form a band, and we did form a band. And we had Portage's very first punk rock band. This was before Propaganda by at least a couple of years. And we played in Winnipeg, and we were really stupid, and we were really fun, and it was a great way to pass my angsty teenage years in Portage-la-Prairie. And it also provided me a little bit of a way out too, because not longer after that I had moved to Edmonton to pursue music further, joined a band there, and came out.
Really neat going out to Edmonton and getting into a bigger city. And so
Winnipeg was before that. I was in Winnipeg too.
Yeah.
I wasn't out in Winnipeg though. I was still a little scared at that time. A scared punk. Yeah, with a bad haircut and not getting any either. Yeah. So, still virgin. But going to Edmonton was amazing because I made sure I came out before that. I mean, I knew the punk scene was open enough to accept that. I mean, it was still wildly full of different opinions and expressions that you had to navigate. But it was still opening up. I found out that in Edmonton was kind of weird to the extent that I would go to a restaurant a little later on, and I would sit beside Katie Lang and her girlfriend. Well, when I had my first boyfriend, I was sitting with my boyfriend. So right across the table from me was another gay lead singer. And that's got to be very good for someone's esteem or acceptance or feeling like a belonging, which is really difficult for gay people because a sense of belonging or feeling like what they have to offer is valid. So that community really helped me come out in a big way. So I came out and had a great time being a part of this awesome hardcore scene, which I got to play with Circle Jerks and the Dead Kennedys, for example, like wicked punk rock bands. The story continues as I got to know my guitar a little bit better and got to sing much better. Our music started to change. I was worried about the hardness of hardcore music, really, and I was feeling a little lighter at the time, and to this day I feel lighter. I think I was embracing my feminine side at last. I shouldn't be afraid of this. There's a lot of really wonderful feminine, stereotypical feminine traits that I think all men should have. The nurturing, the caring, the creativity, perhaps, these things that might be considered feminine. I was openly embracing them, and so I didn't think I was so hardcore at that time, and my music changed, reflected, became much more loving, and eventually I got signed to a major label, which took me to Toronto, and that was a crazy experience because I actually went back into the closet for that. It was discussed amongst my band that maybe it'd be better if the people who liked our music didn't realize I was gay. We got signed to a major label. They didn't know I was gay. We recorded an album, got to record in Paisley Park, got to with Prince's studio, one of my favorite androgynous feminine artists, I've always been a fan of mixing it up in a way. The gender is not something I see that should remain so static and guarded, perhaps so heavily like I was when I was a kid and so afraid of expression and how I see people treated. So I guess there is some justifiable fear, but I always admired these artists and these people that could break those boundaries, like Prince. Yes. And I was in glam music at the time, so I was wearing chiffons, and I had my hair long and no makeup, but I had the velvet velour stretchy tights that I would be wearing, and so I thought there was a bit of feminine in that presentation as well, and I enjoyed that very much so. Even though it was a very straight audience, it was a classic rock sort of audience. It was really kind of neat singing to those people and opening them up to sort of my expression. Glam rock was kind of limited. There wasn't really much room for much other nuances beside the country ballad. I was interested in a much broader range of music, and the kind of glam rock that I liked was kind of Led Zeppelin, who was able to really use a lot of various influences throughout their career.
At this point now, you're in Toronto, and you have the big major label, and you're going around and you're doing music and everything like that. And one of the things I remember we were talking a little bit earlier about was you received an award, and somebody came up. I can't remember who. It was about your lyrics for your songs. Let me tell that story because there might be some discrepancy, or let's tell it straight. We were quite successful. We sold almost 50,000, almost went gold, but our time was really brief with the major label. We were on Much Music. We were pretty much loved, but the time was changing big time too. I have to make sure that this is mentioned because grunge just came in and kicked glam rock's butt to the corner, which I was grateful for too, because I'm a punk at heart, and yes, the scene, although I had a good time playing it with it, I recognized it was kind of limited and wouldn't grow. You just couldn't grow with glam rock. It didn't care about outside influences very much beside the country ballad, whereas I'm into music. I'm into reggae. I'm into jazz. I'm into all sorts of beautiful inflections that you can put on music. The stuff you'd hear like in Led Zeppelin records, but not on a Poison record. So there's a little bit of a difference there. So we were nominated for 3 Juno Awards on our hard rock record, self-titled Big House. And that was awesome. I sat beside Alanis Morissette as she was receiving the Junos for her disco record at that time. That's her pre-grunge years. But we were in the middle of this grunge revolution. And that was a difficult thing to navigate as a glam rocker. And at that time, I was like, what do we do? And in the meantime, I'm writing songs from my heart again. And there's some lyrics that might come up that might sound sexy, like I'm singing about another guy or something like that, or I use the he word or something instead of maybe where a she would go. And there was a lyric that was caught the attention of the president of our label, BMG, and I was actually coming to talk about both that lyric and the censorship of my own lyrics. And that was after they found out I was gay as well. My boyfriend at the time took a painting job to make some money. Times were a little lean as well. I call it the craft dinner and limousines tour or age,
Craft dinner. You live on craft dinner, and then you get picked up in a limousine to go to a party somewhere because the record company's showing you off. But anyway, my boyfriend at the time, I had a boyfriend, very interesting story himself. In the early 90s, and I'll try not to go too far off track, but this was before it was okay to be gay in the military, and when I was first met him, we were being followed by MPs, and he lost his job, and there is some talk right now about remunerating people who lost their jobs because of that unfair practice of banning homosexuality in the military. It was detrimental to our livelihoods at the time. He lost his work, stuff like that. So, but I had a job. I had just got signed to a major label. Anyway, he took this painting job at our producer's place. The producer's wife starts picking at him at questions. And I think maybe my partner at the time had too much of the closet and wanted out and decided to out me. And so I had a few conversations there with the band, with our management, with the record labels about me being gay in the industry. Long and short, after all these incidences, I was let go from that label not too long afterwards, under the premise that they didn't like my new material, creatively not on the same page or something like that. And so I can't really say anything. I mean, I could take them on their word, but for me, it's really suspect that, just shortly after I come up, I was let go from that major label. And it's been a tough gig ever since for me musically, really. I'm really suspicious of the music industry, corporate aspirations, even career aspirations, because I wonder how much musicians will go to sell their song. And I think that's me beating myself up over that, but it's something that's kind of stuck with me ever since that happened. Yeah. A bit soured on the whole industry. And it's taken a lot for me musically. Being authentic is very important to me. And so after being let go, I kind of reacted. At that time, it was also pretty crazy because I was in love with Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, and he just suicided apparently. And a friend of mine had died, and other friends were severely afflicted by HIV, and that sort of soured my mood. Oh, I found out I was adopted. That was crazy. So that sort of really started me on the ball of authenticity. Who was I really? It was a big thing. And so all these sort of negative emotions got wound up being dropped. We reformed the band for various reasons, and my music started to get more darker, and it kind of sounded like my punk rock stuff, my hardcore days, a little bit of that energy. And we changed the name to Dead Man. Big House is Dead Man, so that's over. And I also sort of wanted the future to be, a future that I wasn't afraid to express my sexuality in my music. I think it's really a part of everybody. Sexuality is intrinsic to your personality. So to be able to express that is so important. It's so important to a person's personality. Imagine having to keep something bottled up inside of you for no reason forever. It's like a secret you could never ever tell, and it's such an intrinsic part of you. Imagine if you're an artist and couldn't sing about that. So I decided that in the future that would not be my problem. That would be someone else's problem, what I was singing about. So Dead Man was great. We were so super tight. We were just vicious. We were a slaying rock and roll unit. But times had changed enough, and the youth were taking over that scene, and for good reason. I love that when the youth do that, instead of us listening to old generations' music endlessly. I like it when the youth present their message, their gift to the world, their generation's gift. So I'm appreciative of that. But I've had to, as a growing person, just being able to navigate beside it, along with it, and with my own creations in the past. Dead Man died, and I was okay with that. I started with a 3-piece next. It was called Queer River, so really kind of blatant. I'm gay. And music I'm playing was still much more fun, bouncier, danceable. And to this day I'm playing that music, Queer River music. That's the type of the music I settled into. It took me a long time to get to that point. But that type of rock, that type of bouncy dance rock, it's uplifting, it's inclusive. That's what I wanted to do. So Queer River played a lot of prides in Toronto. And at that time, I had started working at Pre-App, which was the retail gay shop. So I was getting really big into the gay community at that time. And all around me was this political buzz. It was insane because gays were feeling like, yes, we have power, like, yes, we have a voice, and we're going to use it. Gay marriage equality, spousal benefits, these were just beginning. Spousal benefits first in Ontario, and then just a little later, the inklings of the first fights for the gay rights. And I've attended marches, but just being a part of the environment of that time was really exciting. Being a part of a community, which was great. It was a huge community, so Toronto, you could just pick your scene and you'd have a really wonderful, like-minded community. And I settled into a little sports bar, which was, not so flamboyant, but we had our drag shows for fun, our fundraisers. I did drag, I did Blondie, I did Courtney Love in drag, just to fundraise for people with AIDS mostly. Yeah, I would say the Red Ribbon campaigns were huge back then. AIDS was a death sentence. AIDS was a death sentence. Mostly everyone would die eventually of AIDS-related illnesses at that time. Today, you can live. But so it was an urgent crisis for all of us involved to try and find a cure to care for people who were sick. So I did many benefits that way. And my time in Toronto came to an end when my partner and I couldn't afford it anymore. Our jobs wouldn't pay our rent. I guess we were living a bit too large at the time, and we decided to move. I spent a year in northern Quebec with his family, and then we moved to Montreal, where I started working again with Pre-App in their leather dungeon at that time with little styrofoam demons. And I was crafting little leather creations for people to wear intimately or otherwise. It was exciting. It was, again, another great big community, and I was really at the heart of it. Big parties would come, and I was known as the friendly Manitoban. People loved my smile and the service I would give, and I'd welcome tourists from all over the world. Again, I felt like a rock star in that environment, and so it was fun. Partner split to Ottawa to go to school, and I said, that is a good time for me to come back home. I thought I might go to school, too. And this was like, I'm almost 40 at this time. Yeah. Just sort of my life has just been cruising by, and it's still cruising by. And I'm letting it cruise by because I just go with the flow and let life happen with me. And it took me back home to Brandon.
To Brandon, yes. So you did a lot of traveling, and then you lived in a lot of places, and you just talked about them. It's always kind of strange. You sort of think about it, like you're going all these places from Winnipeg to Edmonton to Toronto to Montreal.
It's all Canada.
And all within Canada, and then coming back home and returning back to school. You mentioned that you went to the Brandon University here. There was the LGBTQ club. Okay,
I needed to upgrade my education. I thought I was smart after spending a lot of times in the big city, getting all this informal education. I thought, okay, well, let's put it to use. And so I decided to go to school. I was getting into environmental sciences and geography because I really wanted to write about my most important issue, which is the environment. And in the meantime, I also knew I could come back to Manitoba. I'm from Portage, but Brandon, I had family in Brandon, and this was the place I wanted to come by. It had a school for me to go to. And I also sort of knew, okay, I've learned a lot in those big cities. I should be able to contribute at least a little bit to other people growing up who are like me, LGBT people who might need some help or some role model, someone just to be out there doing things openly that just expresses themselves in a certain way. Anyway, we're all very diverse people. And I know that just being your honest self, you can influence people, or people see you and just they recognize you're being authentic. So I thought I could contribute. And when I went to BU, I found out they had some LGBT groups, but there wasn't anything. And in 2003, when I approached BUSU, Brandon University Student Union, and they just looked at me like, who are you and when can you start working on those things? Yeah, I started actively trying to organize and trying to find the people who would help me organize and find those resources that I needed to organize on campus. And we had the Equality Resource Center, very first year there. I was just an LGBT coordinator of that. There was other issues they were involved with, disability and racial inequality as well. But that morphed into separate groups. The LGBTTQ collective was formed. And during my years there, we did a lot of activities, but my main focus was creating social spaces, because it's a small, diverse community. There's no place for us to go. And we're so diverse that I think we're not capable of direct political action. We tried a few things. The blood bank issue. It's not legal for gay men to donate blood, so that was one issue that we focused on. But mostly it was just to present a social space, a gathering space. So we had social nights, we had fetish and fantasy nights, positive space weeks as well.
Those fantasy and fetish nights and that, they're still going.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
The fetish and fantasy events were excellent because they really mixed a whole bunch of people up. We had all types of LGBT people plus straight people mingling and really having a great time together. That was probably the best part of it. I do believe that in order we have to make bridges into the straight community in order for change to occur too. Okay, and but it was also noted by a really strange investigation by Brandon police detectives, because the Brandon Sun thought there might be something crazy happening in our events. So we were investigated by a couple of plainclothes detectives, and they saw what was happening, and they knew it was immediately not threatening or worth their time. Thank you very much, detectives.
You've done a lot. And going to like with BU, of course, the LGBTTQ group is still going.
Yes,
and
yes, it is.
It's
a very positive thing.
And the events, the fetish and fantasy nights, I even attended them because I had a lot of friends who were in the group and so I came as support.
They're fun.
They're super fun.
Get to express yourself.
And you learn a lot, and you get to meet people, and you get to understand things. And from your experiences living out in the world, at least in Canada, and going from one end of the coast to the other end is quite amazing. And you faced against homophobia in many different ways. Is there any other stories that you want to...
Well, I think I would like to be able to say here, and I was saving this for the end, but the homophobia that I did experience has been few and far between. When you compare to the stories that I've heard from other people, especially people of color, especially our First Nations LGBTTQ people, especially feminine gay men or out lesbians, it's really tragic. I've been so fortunate because I don't know how masculine I am. I can pass as straight. I can pass. That's a privilege. It's a privilege in the sense that I'm not being second guessed all the time, as I see it happen to other people. I just know that I'm much more accepted. I mean, I hear people say, "Oh, I like gays like you because you're not acting all femmy," and I don't let that go. I don't let that go at all. I mean, that's the way people are. It's a diversity. It's expression. Here's what I want to say about this. Ties into this sort of revelation I sort of had today. It was about how straight or conservative. I don't want to say just straight. Let's say very conservative straight people who have this fear that gay people can influence them to be gay. And they say that things like gay is not natural. They're worried about this gay influence rubbing off on their children. Well, if that's the case, then that must mean that heterosexuality is the most fragile thing that I can imagine. That just a suggestion of gay to a young kid would make them gay. Then how natural is heterosexuality? Maybe homosexuality is the more natural state. It's just that society beats us out of it. I mean, how fragile can heterosexuality be if it's threatened by the mere mention of homosexuality? How natural is it? So anyway, my privilege is important to state, of just being able to pass. But it's kind of humorous that I've been discriminated against by other gay people. It's not a vicious discrimination. It's not vicious. It's not mean. It's kind of just do you know this is a gay club when I walk in? And I went, I'm gay, sister. It's a silly discrimination, and I shouldn't even bring that up, because we don't want to underestimate the violence that is the homophobic violence against my femme brothers and sisters, people of color, trans people. They face a very real, threatening discrimination and violence, and my experiences do not compare.
That was Jan Eck, local musician and producer of many documentaries for CJ 106 FM here in Brandon. giving his story as part of our Queer Lives Focus. Please join us again to hear more stories from the Brandon's LGBTQ community. My name is Dakota Bicklemeyer, and you have been listening to Out on CJ 106 FM.